The Last 24 Hours, Inside the CDC Shooting That Claimed a Hero. By Killer Truth. The CDC shooting, inside the final hours of Patrick Joseph White. It was still dark over Kennesaw when Patrick Joseph White decided this was the day. The 30-year-old, once described as a friendly neighbor with a quick laugh, had become a man adrift, convinced that the COVID-19 vaccine had ruined his health, haunted by the recent death of his dog, and sinking deeper into isolation. In the hours before sunrise on August 8, 2025, he was pacing the edges of his own unraveling. By the next midday, a veteran police officer would be dead, a busy Atlanta CVS would be a crime scene, and the question would hang in the humid Georgia air: could this have been stopped? The countdown. Calendar August 7, 10:45 p.m. Kennesaw. Neighbors see him outside, walking quick circles around his silver sedan. He's muttering under his breath, eyes darting to the ground. Later, one will tell investigators. It looked like he was in a conversation with someone who wasn't there. At 11:15 p.m., a private social media account linked to White lights up with a post: "Tomorrow, they'll hear me." Minutes later, the house goes dark, but his phone doesn't. Investigators will later discover his search history shows no rest: CDC security maps, cop response times, and vaccine conspiracy videos. Calendar August 8, 5:32 a.m. phone call. His father calls. The conversation lasts just 2 minutes. He sounded desperate. Like there was no coming back, his father says. By 6:10 a.m., White's phone is back online, this time pulling up directions to the CDC's main campus. 7 a.m. gas station stop. Security cameras capture him buying fuel and bottled water, dressed in tactical-style clothing beneath a loose jacket. 9:21 a.m. the missed alarm. In Kennesaw, his father dials 911. "My son's armed. I think he's going to hurt himself, maybe someone else." The report is entered into the system, but whether that alert reached all responding agencies in time remains unclear. 10:02 a.m. the drive. White loads his long gun, 2 handguns, and a shotgun into his car. On the passenger seat, a small urn holds his late dog's ashes and unspoken farewell. By 10:50 a.m., he's circling the CDC campus in Atlanta, scanning gates and security posts. 11:07 a.m. first rejection. At a security checkpoint, a guard denies him entry. His jaw tightens. He turns the car away. 11:15 a.m. final stop. White parks across the street at a CVS. For 7 long minutes, he sits motionless, head bent over his phone. 11:22 a.m. gunfire. The quiet shatters. Shouts. Glass breaking. Customers scramble for cover. At 11:24 a.m., DeKalb County Officer David Rose bursts through the door. Seconds later, gunfire exchanges. Rose falls, mortally wounded. By 11:26 a.m., White is down. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation will later confirm he died from a gunshot wound, but whether it was self-inflicted or police-fired remains unanswered. The life behind the badge: Officer David Rose. Name: David Rose. Age: 34. Department: DeKalb County Police Department. Years of service: 9. Survivors: wife, 2 young children, ages 6 and 3. David Rose didn't just wear the badge, he lived it. Born and raised in Decatur, Georgia, Rose was known for remembering birthdays on his beat and stopping to play catch with neighborhood kids. His path to law enforcement began after years in construction. At 23, he entered the police academy, graduating top of his class with awards in marksmanship and community service. August 8 was supposed to be routine. Rose had started his shift early, covering for a fellow officer whose child was sick. The call to the CVS came in mid-morning: shots fired, possible active shooter. He was there in minutes, putting himself between the gunman and the customers inside. Chief Marlon Banks said it best. David gave his life doing exactly what he swore to do: protect others. We'll carry that example with us for the rest of our careers. By 3 p.m., Patrick Joseph White's name was public. The FBI, GBI, and Atlanta police began sifting through his digital trail, piecing together the image of a man consumed by false beliefs and grief, spiraling toward violence. Officer Rose's patrol car now sits draped in black cloth outside the precinct, flowers piled high. A memorial fund for his wife and 2 children has already surpassed its first goal. The CDC, meanwhile, has tightened its security, another layer of steel and procedure against the unpredictable. But in the wake of the tragedy, the same question echoes: could anyone have stopped Patrick White before the countdown began? On the morning of August 8, 2025, Atlanta awoke to the unsettling sight of flashing lights and police cordons near one of the most secure public health facilities in the world, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. By day's end, a DeKalb County police officer lay dead, and so did the man responsible, 30-year-old Patrick Joseph White of Kennesaw, Georgia. The man behind the gun. Neighbors described Patrick White as once sociable and active, but in recent years, something had shifted. He had become fixated on the belief that the COVID-19 vaccine had harmed him, a claim he shared with growing agitation. According to one neighbor, he was very unsettled. He very deeply believed vaccines hurt him. Friends and family noticed his mental health deteriorating, worsened by the recent loss of his dog. His father, alarmed by signs of suicidal thoughts, contacted authorities just hours before the shooting, hoping they could intervene before tragedy struck. A calculated approach. That afternoon, heavily armed with a long gun, several handguns, and a shotgun, White drove to the CDC's main campus near Emory University. It remains unclear whether his target was symbolic, personal, or both. Security personnel turned him away, forcing him to redirect. Instead, White crossed the street to a CVS pharmacy. Witnesses recall chaos erupting almost instantly. Gunfire shattered glass and sent bystanders scrambling for cover. Officer David Rose, responding to the call, was fatally struck during the exchange. Arsenal, found armed with multiple firearms, including a long gun, handguns, and a shotgun. Location: after being turned away from CDC security, he moved across the street to a CVS pharmacy, where the shooting occurred. Aftermath: he was discovered inside the CVS pharmacy, dead from a gunshot wound. It is unclear if it was self-inflicted or caused by Pollock. The standoff. Inside the CVS, White was found dead minutes later. Investigators have not yet determined whether his fatal wound was self-inflicted or caused by police return. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, working alongside the FBI and local law enforcement, quickly secured the scene and began piecing together his motives. The shadow of misinformation. This tragedy has reignited debates about the real-world consequences of vaccine misinformation. White's fixation was rooted in his conviction that the vaccine caused his depression, a belief with no scientific basis, but one that consumed him in the months leading up to the attack. CDC staff have since been reassured about security, but unions and public health advocates are calling for more than just armed guards. They want a direct and public denouncement of harmful disinformation that can push unstable individuals toward violence. Aftermath. The loss of Officer Rose, remembered as a dedicated public servant, has shaken the Atlanta community. For many, the case is a grim reminder that misinformation, untreated mental illness, and easy access to weapons form a volatile mix. White's death closes the chapter on a dangerous standoff, but questions remain. Was the CDC his intended target? Could an earlier intervention by police or mental health services have prevented the shooting? How can society address the growing intersection between conspiracy theories and violent acts? As investigators comb through White's digital footprint and interview those who knew him, one thing is certain: the shooting was not just an isolated act of violence. It was the endpoint of a deepening personal crisis, fueled by paranoia and mistrust, that ended in gunfire on an otherwise ordinary Friday. The last 24 hours of Patrick White. By Your Name. It was still dark over Kennesaw when Patrick Joseph White decided this was the day. The 30-year-old, once described as a friendly neighbor with a quick laugh, had become a man adrift, convinced that the COVID-19 vaccine had ruined his health, haunted by the recent death of his dog, and sinking deeper into isolation. In the hours before sunrise on August 8, 2025, he was pacing the edges of his own unraveling. Night before, August 7, 10:45 p.m. Neighbors see him outside, walking quick circles around his silver sedan. He's muttering under his breath, eyes darting to the ground. Later, one will tell investigators. It looked like he was in a conversation with someone who wasn't there. At 11:15 p.m., a private social media account linked to White lights up with a post, "Tomorrow, they'll hear me." Minutes later, the house goes dark, but his phone doesn't. Investigators later discover that his search history shows no arrest, security maps of the CDC, articles on cop response times, and videos questioning vaccine safety. Dawn, August 8, 5:32 a.m. His father calls. The conversation lasts just 2 minutes. He sounded desperate. Like there was no coming back, his father says. By 6:10 a.m., White's phone is back on the web, this time pulling up directions to the CDC's main campus. Early morning, 7 a.m. A gas station camera captures him buying fuel and water. He's wearing tactical-style clothing beneath a loose jacket, his face unreadable. 9:21 a.m., the missed alarm. In Kennesaw, his father dials 911. "My son's armed. I think he's going to hurt himself, maybe someone else." The report is entered into the system, but whether that alert reached all officers in time remains unclear. The drive, 10:02 a.m. White loads his long gun, 2 handguns, and a shotgun into his car. Ashes of his late dog sit in an urn on the passenger seat, an unspoken farewell. By 10:50 a.m., he's circling the CDC campus in Atlanta, moving slowly, scanning the gates. First rejection, 11:07 a.m. At a security checkpoint, a guard denies him entry. Witnesses recall his jaw tightening before he turns the car away. The final stop, 11:15 a.m. White parks across the street at a CVS. For 7 long minutes, he sits motionless, head bent over his phone. Gunfire, 11:22 a.m. The quiet breaks. Shouts, shattering glass, the first reports of gunfire. Customers scramble behind counters and shelves. At 11:24 a.m., DeKalb County Officer David Rose bursts into the store. A firefight follows. Rose falls, mortally wounded. The end, 11:26 a.m. When backup arrives, White is down. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation will later confirm he died from a gunshot wound, but whether it was self-inflicted or police-fired remains unanswered. Aftermath. By 3 p.m., Patrick Joseph White's name is public. His history, paranoia, isolation, grief, begins spilling out in neighbor interviews and old posts. The FBI, GBI, and Atlanta police collect evidence, comb through his digital trail, and piece together the same chilling picture. A man convinced of a falsehood. A mental health spiral unbroken by intervention. A tragedy that claimed an officer's life and could have been far worse.